I'm Jim Csek. You're watching KelownaNow.
And I'm Renee Merrifield, recovering politician, community leader, here to talk about how politics matters to you and what issues might affect your life.
Lots going on in the political world beyond the ballot. So, big, like this past 2 months has been crazy for the political world.
Absolutely wild. And I have to say, first and foremost, we were wrong. I did not think that we would know election night who had won, and sure enough, man, was it ever a very decided vote that happened last Tuesday.
Yeah, and it was, yeah, I caught off guard too, and it was all the swing states went his way, every
All of
last
them.
one of them, right? Because I mean, you looked at it, and I've watched, between CNN, MSNBC, and Fox and all that, and they played it out, CBC and Global, and they all kind of played it out and said basically most of those states are decided, other than the seven swing states, and they all went his way.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a weird, strange, and wonderful night. There were a lot of people actually that seemed shocked and surprised by the outcome. And then there was this whole half of the world that seemed to understand what was going to happen. We had talked about the BC Lottery Corp, and you had brought to my attention just the different odds that were going on, and like you look at all of these other like parapolitical organizations or the stock market, and there were a lot of them guessing that Trump was going to win and win decidedly on that night.
Yeah, I know. And I was watching, I think I texted you and I said, like, Bitcoin called it early because Bitcoin
Yeah.
just shot through the roof. And as did the betting markets. They went to 94% early on before anybody else called it. Elon Musk and a lot of people, including CNN, said Pennsylvania was the key. And it really turned out to be Pennsylvania. And the Trump team spent a lot of energy in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and money. There
Yeah.
was so much money that was spent in those last days of the election. It's one thing that I don't think Canadians really understand is just the vast amount of dollars that get spent in the U.S. on elections. I mean, companies can give that 40 million, 50 million to a campaign, and there was a lot of money being spent in in those few states that really determined this election.
CNN and MSNBC are kind of like crying their woes, saying that the right wing media now is more like Joe Rogan, and then they wish they had a Joe Rogan. And my answer to that is you had Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan was on the left of center, as was Elon Musk, as was RFK, and they all left the party. And I think that a lot of what I see out there is the Democrats left the working class people too. Do you know what I mean? Like they became a party of elitists.
Yeah, and you're right that they're crying the blues that there has been the shift to the right, but it's been a shift. It's not where people felt the most comfortable, but they're seeing the left, and as they veer farther and farther left, they're trying to find the balance, and they're trying to find who a voice out there that's still investigating, that's still really drilling down on the issues, and unfortunately, Joe Rogan has become that and become a real beacon. But to call him a right wing individual, I think was a little bit, a little bit of a far stretch for those that have watched his podcast. And my recommendation to those at CNN would be to start watching a little bit more carefully.
I mean, a lot of the outlets are now calling Joe Rogan the most powerful voice in the political world, and he didn't start out in the political world. I mean, he just kind of leaned into this, and he's definitely has not very many good things to say about our own political leader. Joe Rogan it says he won't come to Canada until he's been replaced, but. Um, there was a couple comments from their Joe Rogan, I guess Mark Cuban, and talking about like strong women. That one kind of backfired on him as well, because the media picked that up and said that Trump surrounds himself with weak women and stuff like that. And you even see the pick when he picked his chief of staff, first ever female, Susie Wiles, and she's been on his campaign many times though too, right? So.
Yeah, and she actually, he won both times that he had a female campaign manager. So you look at choosing, that person that's going to be in your ear, walking side by side, and has a tremendous amount of pull. Over you, really. People think that the campaign is really driven by the leader. It's really driven by that campaign manager who tells you where to go, what to do, when to show up, and is controlling so many different variables. So to say that that is not a strong female person in his life would be a real ignorant aspect or comment to make.
And if you look at his recent appointment for the ambassador to the UN, Elsie Stefanik, and then it looks like Kristi Noem's going to get tapped for a really important job as well. So I would say that that comment by Mark Cuban, he's probably eating his words on that one.
Absolutely. But when you're talking about all of the appointments that Trump is making, I think, one of the comments and one of the issues that we were talking about last week was all surrounding on what this means for Canada. And I think that that's really important to look at what some of these posts mean. And, we have a deteriorating relationship with the U.S. We have not been spending the amount of money that we need to. We have not been playing, ball with them when it comes to some of the bigger issues. We got really hosed in the last USMCA or what used to be what is the agreement between Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. But to see him put as his national security advisor, to see Trump put Mike Waltz, who has been voracious in his criticism of Trudeau, of Canada, of our of what we've done, that's a huge signal for how Trump sees us and for what's in store for the next at least 1 year until there's a different leader in place here in Canada.
Yeah, so you have Elon Musk has even said a few things past the election here on Canada. I think their eyes are turning towards Canada, and Joe Rogan obviously has not a lot of love for what the Trudeau government has done, and now with that very important position, Canada does not look to be in a great position in dealing with the United States.
No, I mean, we've underperformed on our whether it's NATO and how much we've spent on our military. And you and I were having the conversation before we started here about how vulnerable that makes us on our northern border with Russia and China in particular. I mean, they've been amassing a large amount of forces up on that northern border, and I think if Canadians understood just how vulnerable we are, as that's their easiest path to the United States.
Yeah, people need to look at a globe as opposed to a flat map. Like, pick up a globe and take a look. We share the largest unprotected border with Russia, but there is some water. There's some ice between us, right? So they have a base up there. They have submarines up there. They have icebreakers up there, and obviously Alaska is very close to. There's that. We're kind of like connected on our what you would call our western flank and plus our northern flank, right?
Yes, and from icebreakers, submarines, and even their air force and the flyovers that they've been doing are very, very scary when it comes to all of our natural resources and why those countries would want Canada for its own. And for us to be underspending and to be really disappointing our NATO allies that is a huge blunder, and then to be justifying, yes, we are going to spend more, but it's you're overestimating our economy. I mean, on the one hand, I'm like, well, at least they're saying that they're not going to be performing very well, but on the other hand, it's scary to think that they think that a few justifications on how they're factoring our economy will allow them to continue the underspend on NATO. Trump is not Biden, and Trump is not going to take that lightly, and he's not going to spend military capital where he doesn't feel that that the other countries are doing their share. They're not asking a lot. 2% of our GDP should be spent on military. Our military is woefully underfunded, and it's something that we need to start paying attention to.
Usually your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness, and I would say Donald Trump's greatest strength is that he's a bully, and he's a very strong negotiator, and we already see this in the world playing out where we're seeing like European nations saying we need to spend more money, Canada saying we need to spend more money on defense, and then like Hamas saying we need to settle this war, we need to talk, and then even in Putin saying we're ready to negotiate. Everybody seems ready to come to the table because Trump is a bully, and he knows how to wield that big stick.
He's not just a bully. He is an unpredictable bully who doesn't play by any rules. he makes up the rules as he goes, and that is an incredible asset for the American people and incredibly terrifying for the rest of the world. And you're seeing that. I mean, we're seeing the headlines say that Putin has no other options now that Trump is in power. You're, like you said, the European Union. I mean, I watched Macron's address where he was saying, like, basically, hey, Trump is going to protect the Americans. Are we ready to stand up and protect the Europeans? It's this feeling of, hey, we all have to really stand to attention and do a much greater job of what we are, what we need to do in order to protect ourselves. The scary thing is that Trump's response was, well, I've always really gotten along with, or not Trump, Trudeau's response to Trump winning was like, well, we've gotten along, and I've said, congratulations, friend. And it's like, oh my goodness, you have missed the plot, sir. You have missed the plot.
I think anybody can play some videos back for him, and it won't go well.
No, not at all. Not at all. So.
Yeah, I mean, people have to recognize that the Americans have a very big stick. I mean, they have the biggest stick in the world. And after the embarrassing withdrawal from Afghanistan, it really made the military look weak. And then a lot of people took advantage of the U.S. military or their policeman role in the world.
Yeah, and furthermore, I think that we got too ideological. The U.S. spent trillions of dollars really trying to create programs and social services, et cetera. And that's like a hungry ghost. You spend on those things, but if you don't have your economy firing on all cylinders, if you don't have your defense going, you really lose out. That's going to shift dramatically under Trump. Trump's going to spend a ton of money on defense. He's going to spend a ton of money on stimulating the economy to make sure that people have great paying jobs and are really excited to protect what they have. And with that comes a lot of fear and trepidation from those of us that are not part of the U.S. and those of us that have not done a good job of our relationship with Trump.
So one of the things Trump did in his last term was he started Space Force, and most people laughed at him at that point. And what now he has, I would say, the Thomas Edison of our time at his right-hand man, basically, Elon Musk, that is leading the world in AI and so many other things. Like, I think we're entering a world, they're calling it the golden age, but I think we're entering a world of innovation, especially if Elon Musk is given more latitude to kind of create, because he's been kind of like hindered by the Biden administration with regulations that went after him a lot too. With SpaceX and all those things, it makes the United States a bigger, stronger military threat to the world.
Yes, especially because those are paramilitary organizations, right? They don't have the same...
It's a military contractor.
Exactly. And military contractors, we've seen them used by Russia, let's say, in the past. Military contractors are very, very scary because they play with a different set of rules. So, seeing Elon Musk have the prominence that he has will definitely signal to many that it is a very new era. The other thing is that we'll see that innovation kind of supercharged. It will gain access in ways that it would normally have to go, to each of the individual countries, and now it will come through the United States and through their government, which I think will supercharge it in a way that we haven't seen yet. So while it might be a golden era for some, I think that it could be a very dangerous era if it's not controlled correctly. Now, having said that, someone said, "Oh, Zelensky's got to be scared of Elon Musk," and I was like, "Wait a second." When Zelensky lost all of his communications towers, because that's what Russia went for first, it was actually Starlink and Elon Musk that stepped in and said, "I can get you reconnected in 24 hours. Here I go." So we have seen him, whether it be in disaster areas or whether we, see it within war zones, where he's actually, turned the tap on. And when, countries have gotten too militaristic or too controlling where it comes to, what's shared, i.e. Brazil, he shuts the tap off. And that has had very damaging effects on those countries. So I do think that he's had a tremendous amount of power already. I think that Trump was was wily in how he allied himself with Elon Musk. I think it gave him a younger image to some extent. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how we see that supercharged, whether it's AI, whether it's the SpaceX program. But it's going to be really, really interesting.
Yeah, so they've got control of the presidency, obviously, and then the House, the Senate, and it looks, according to Elon Musk, he has control of the House. I mean, that's not confirmed by most major outlets, but he did put it out there last night on American PAC that the House goes his way. I mean, it looks, even if you look at the other outlets, that it's a foregone conclusion as well. So they will have all three levels of government. And then they are picking their cabinet really quickly. So I think they want to hit the ground running and get a lot of stuff done.
Yeah, his first 100 days, he's made a lot of promises. So that will be very interesting. Trevor Tome came out with a great article on what that means to Canada. Just the tariffs alone will have a very significant impact. The other headline I read this morning was on if you hear a sucking noise, it's investment dollars going to the U.S. And he was talking about how other countries will experience that just absolute vacuum of dollars coming into their coffers and their businesses, and really it going to the U.S. under a Trump administration with a fully controlled government.
Yeah, we need really good negotiators on our side, and to show the benefits of why Canada is a good partner for the United States, because we're not going to bully them. We're not going to win that argument. But so we have to show we have a lot of natural resources. That's our big ace, I guess. That's our big card that we can play.
Yeah, but we've got Guilbeault basically putting a production cap on us. That's the most asinine thing you could do with a country that only really has natural resources as its major, I guess, trading source.
Our trump card, get it? Our trump card.
Someone asked me this week, well, what would you do? How would you do that differently? And I said, I remember Harper. And when Harper was negotiating with Obama at the time, what he did is he started opening up other trade partners. He went, over to the Middle East. He went over to China. He went over to Europe, and he started trying to really establish other trade partners to really, decouple us from the U.S. And he did that quite successfully, because then the U.S. was coming to us saying, "Oh, please, 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 can we still have a relationship?" That ended with Trudeau. Absolutely ended. It was like an absolute stop to everything that we were doing on that front. And when we did that, we literally lost our only cards that we could play when it comes to negotiations with that beast of a country, the U.S. Mexico has played it better. They've opened up a trade route that the U.S. absolutely loves, that goes right, east south or east west across Mexico, and gets them, their goods through there faster than they can through the Panama Canal. That is a massive boon to Mexico and to its economy, and we've seen that and really seen that take place.
They are now the United States' largest trading partner, a role that we used to have.
Yes. I know, and I'm so sad about that. Yeah. It's very disappointing to see us lose on that front.
Moving on from the Trump election, we have a federal election here, a by-election here in British Columbia, and that'll be the third test for the Liberals.
It will. And that one is a swing riding. So that one goes back and forth usually. And so it will be very interesting to see what happens on that one. It will be interesting to see, who gets it. I was hoping that we wouldn't have another fall election. I think that the Canadians are tired. They've had 4 provincial elections across Canada. So I was hoping that we wouldn't have a federal election. Him calling this by-election does seem to signal that we're not going to have a federal election. I do think, though, that spring could be a full-blown federal election, but to have this by-election now will be another test of Trudeau, and he's got to be thinking to call it now that he has a chance of winning it, because they usually try and time it in their favor. So maybe he's hoping that the fatigue of the provincial election here will get a lower voter turnout, or maybe the negative news articles about the Conservatives will de-shine our Conservative candidate here. But it'll be an interesting one to watch indeed.
Their biggest weapon that they've used on Polyev was that he's too Trump-like. It'll be a tough weapon to play right now, especially when they're trying to strengthen relationships with the U.S. I mean, that'd be a really tough card to play.
And too Trump-like. Trump won.
I know.
I mean, the percentage that he won by was remarkable. So to say he's too Trump-like, well, that's basically to predict his win. And I mean, in the polls, he's still predicted to win. He's still, leading. I think Leger had him up by 15. Main Street still has him up by 20. So, if he's too Trump-like, well, I mean, that's just because he is slated to win. Now, the one thing I'll say about Pierre Poilievre is he's been far more judicious, far more rigorous in his candidate selection. We see that, he has a tremendous amount of rigor where it comes to those different candidates. So he's not going to have the same issues that Rustad had with his candidates. He's not going to have the same, loose cannons as it was. So I do think that this one is really Pierre's to lose. It's not one that's going to be super easy for Trudeau at this time.
Pierre's in BC right now too. He's in Princeton today, I think.
Yeah, I did. I think I saw that. He's definitely stumping hard around these parts for sure.
There's a lot of people hoping for an election. Mario has called it, as you and I discussed too, that we're likely to see a spring one. If we don't see spring, it's obviously going all the way to the fall. There's talk out there that they were trying, like Holly Doan from Blacklocks was saying that they were trying to delay it so that they could get some more pensions certified.
Well, that's the biggest one, is that you've got two other small parties that have huge pensions that are at stake. If you think that you're going to be losing an election, then you really want to make sure that your pensions are put together, if that's what you're in it for. And that was the accusation against Jagmeet Singh. I don't think it's that far off the truth. And that's why they won't collapse government or work with the Conservatives. The Conservatives have been very principled in this matter and have said, that they don't care when those pensions are, and they want to have an election. They want to have a carbon tax election. They want to have an election where the people get to speak their mind. And that's also because they really believe they're going to win. Yeah. So, they don't think that they'll have as many losses. And as we saw even here locally, in BC, we saw some of those 4-year MLAs who had only been in for 4 years, they lost their elections and won't be pensioned. So I do think there is something to that. It's sad for me. I never think that someone should go into politics for the pension that they get. But there's a lot of people who will work that extra 1 or 2 years to see them get a pension.
Definitely not in the best interests of Canadians that seem to be screaming loud in the polls. It seems very selfish and elitist again, and we've seen that play out in the U.S., where it seems like the party lost connection with the working class people, and that's why I think the polls show so strongly that the Conservatives will win in a landslide.
Well, and what Trump did very effectively was tie the Biden administration to the circumstances that the working class found themselves in. It was something that Rustad was not able to do to the same extent, was really tie EB to, the crime that we see on our streets, the homelessness that we see on our streets, the lack of housing that we see on our streets. And I was looking just recently at the city of Kelowna's housing numbers, and we are so far down. We're down below 2017 numbers in terms of housing starts. And, someone said to me, yeah, but there's so many cranes in the air. There's so much construction going on. And I said, yeah, that's all from 2 years ago, all from a year ago. They are not seeing that happen this year. 2024 is almost done. But the scariest part of that post that I read from Ryan Smith at the city of Kelowna was that they are not seeing new applications coming through the door. Because if they're not seeing new applications come through the door, that does not bode well for 2025. That does not bode well for 2026, because that's how long, developments take to get off the ground. So, but Rustad was not able to tie all that was going on with Bill 44 and all of the new housing. And he wasn't able to tie, our tourism being so down and our restaurants going under with with the administration that EB has held over the last 4 years, 7 years total, and that's something that Trump did very, very effectively. It's something that Pierre is doing very effectively, and the Poilievre campaign team has really tied Trump to what we are experiencing today, and I think that's why he'll have an easier time with the election, whenever it happens, whether it's spring or fall.
With David Eby, you said before we went on, you were saying that there was a comment that came from David Eby's camp on his willingness or non-willingness to work with conservatives.
Oh, Jim, I wish it was his camp. This was him. This was what he said. And I'm going to read the quote. I have it on my phone here, so I'm going to read it because I was so incredulous when I read this. And I quote, "We're open to working with other MLAs, including from the Conservatives, as long as they meet our bright line test around the kind of province that we want," end quote. And this is in an article with Rob Shaw. And the column actually, is entitled "Premier Eby Vows to Work Only with MLAs Who Hold Acceptable Views." That is an absolute obliteration of how the legislative assemblies are supposed to work. Yes, they look like a duke 'em out kind of exercise, but truly, they are supposed to work in harmony once you get inside of those walls. You are supposed to be able to walk across that floor and really talk to each other and work on issues that constituents are having. He basically is saying, I'm only going to work with those that agree with me, rather than those that are in disagreement with me. So I think that is something that the British Columbian people should hold EB to account on, and definitely should take exception with that, because that defies democracy. In that, democracy only works when all of the voices are around the table and all of the voices are weighing in on what the people want. And that for me was an absolute, it flew in the face of what we've experienced in the past and what we know the Legislative Assembly to be to this point.
A sharp contrast for sure from what he said right after the election. British Columbians, we hear you, because it was basically almost a 50-50 election. He has a slim margin, right? Like, he has a very slim margin. The vote was very, very tight between, like, the popular vote as well. Very, very tight. And now to say that he's not interested in working or listening to half of British Columbians seems odd.
Oh, it exceptionally so. And the only thing I can think of is that it's because the MLAs he was trying to get to turn their backs on their party and become speaker had told him no. Yeah. So it's like, okay, because you were told no, you're playing a little sour grapes, which it really is not very statesman-like, and it definitely flies in the face of the democratic process.
Have they named the Speaker of the House yet?
No, they won't until the session is called. It's usually pretty held under tight wraps, unless it is someone that everyone's pretty in agreement with. So in this case, it does look like it's going to come from the NDP party. It's going to put their majority at odds. If the Greens decide to vote with the Conservatives, that will, that could topple government. This is going to be a really tight government. And I will note that BC was the only one that the polls were right. The polls were not right in the US. The polls were not right in Saskatchewan, as Scott Moe walked to a huge majority, 62% of the popular vote, and the vast majority of the seats in the Legislative Assembly there. Even Danielle Smith, it was like, oh, she's going to lose her confidence vote of the leadership, of her own party, and she won by 91% or 92%. So it was really only in BC that those polls were, neck and neck, and truly, that's how it came out in all ways.
So there's a little bit of a wrinkle in the BC one, though, because Rustad was handed the ball by Kevin Falcon and fumbled it, and maybe that's why, because Mario Canseco said if he'd have played that right, they would have won in a landslide. So
100%. 100%.
So I think maybe that's why we ended up with this close one, because it seems like all the polls seem to be getting it wrong, leaning one way too. Because like if you look at Scott Moe, you look at Danielle Smith, 91% approval rating, big. I mean, she's a very strong, powerful woman. Maybe a future Prime Minister of Canada. She doesn't back down. She's She's articulate. She's very, very smart. And then if you look in the United States, the polls that got it right were the betting polls. They were definitely had the margins almost bang on. They seem to be. If you look at the U.S. stock market right now, definitely, they were definitely waiting for a Trump victory too, right? So it seems like maybe the polling needs to be reworked as well, right?
Definitely. There's, pollsters. Typically, we're relying on phone polls to get that live person on the other end and really randomized. They can't rely on that anymore, and so they've been going to online. But then you get the same pool of people that are answering over and over and over again. So how random is it actually? How real is it? So they're going to have to do it in a different way, and I think that AI in the end is going to start to really tell us how people are feeling about certain things, largely because I think it can start mining for data, mining for how many people are talking about Trump, how many people are talking about in that particular case, Harris, for our election, mining for how many people are talking about Trudeau positively, how many people are talking about Pierre. Like, it's going to be really an interesting game as to who figures it out first. But certainly we have to figure out a different way because they're just not accurate right now. And if we go back to Danielle Smith, I was not a Danielle Smith fan. Not when she first came, just the way it all happened with the Wild Rose Party. And, she was kind of a leader of some really big radicals. And then when she crossed the floor to the, PCs at the time, or UCPs, that was a real, odd move. I felt like. The one thing I will say is that you didn't mention, in terms of her strength and her smarts and her eloquence, is that she's also very principled and very pragmatic. Like, she is all about what is the biggest impact, and she's not afraid to make unpopular decisions, I guess, as it were. Like, even what they're doing with the healthcare, and I'm looking and watching very, very carefully. She's basically trying to unpoliticize the healthcare system and separate it into 4 crown corporations. Very bold move, huge amount of criticism that was labored at her in making this move. She has remained steadfast, and now all of a sudden the numbers are proving her accuracy. Her numbers are starting to look at, like, on the mental health front and on the fentanyl overdose and crisis that we're experiencing. Her numbers are going in a very positive trajectory, faster than anywhere else across Canada. So you look at the bold moves that she made with Marshall Smith, first putting him in charge of the mental health and substance use aspect. Now he's her chief of staff. She's made some really bold moves that have proven very, very positive for the Albertans. And I think that, I think that it'll be really interesting to watch that transpire.
No different than Donald Trump, America first, Danielle Smith, Alberta first. And she wears her heart on her sleeve. She speaks passionately, and she really pushes hard for Alberta.
Oh my goodness, that press conference. I'm pissed. I was like, oh no, like, you don't say that. But she was so mad. I mean, Guilbeault coming out with that production cap. You could not have asked for a worse policy for the Albertans. So, for her to say pound sand, and this is not going to be tolerated, I think was right on. And I can understand her ire, and I definitely feel like it was well placed. But you're right. She is standing up loudly and willing to collaborate, willing to be at the table, willing to see things both ways. But when it comes back and it's completely not even an ounce of it of understanding of their position, I mean, she's right to get very upset, very angry.
I would say Stephen Guilbeault and Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland no longer have the mandate of Canadians. They are carrying out their own selfish elitist agenda, and it's hurting Canadians, and they can hear that. They can hear the voices, yet they choose to ignore them. Here we come to April again, and likely another carbon tax increase, and pushing Canadians further and further into poverty. If you look at Donald Trump's, what he's going to do down there, he's going to push energy, right? He's going to drill, baby, drill is what they say. It's going to push oil and gas prices down, and that means it'll go down here in Alberta as well. Plus, we won't have access to market probably. So it'll really make it really tough for Albertans in that respect with this current government.
Well, and that's case in point. You know, we talked about how Harris and the Biden administration had lost the ear to really hear the people. That's true of what's happening right now with Trudeau. He's lost the ear to hear the people, and we have it far worse. Our economy is worse. Our cost of living is worse. Our housing is worse. Our healthcare is worse than the U.S. So we have so much more to complain about. And even as gas prices fall, if they flood the market, drill baby drill, it's going to take a while for them to get that online. But when that does happen, our carbon tax will offset any lowering of prices. And so we're still going to be in this horrible aspect. And I don't know if you saw, but there was a new journal article that was out published on the carbon tax and the impact of the carbon tax on our food pricing. Finally, we have data and proof that our carbon tax actually is negatively affecting our cost of food. And very well done by the Food Association out of Quebec. That proves exactly what we all feel, experience, and intuitively know. If everyone is paying carbon tax at every single level, food gets more expensive. So it's it's this very interesting dynamic that we have right now, and I think that is going to increase as we see our neighbors to the south enjoying a more positive economy and enjoying a lower cost of living. I don't know about you, but anecdotally, you know, I've got friends and family that are talking about going to the States. They're talking about living there. You know, my sister and brother still live down there. And they comment about how inexpensive it is to live, and how expensive food is. And my sister was recently visiting us from Texas, and she literally said, "What are you guys doing? Like, holy Hannah, this is expensive." She's gagging at the prices in the restaurants. She's gagging at the prices in the supermarket, and she's like, "I don't know how you guys make ends meet." It's really difficult, and it's no wonder 40% of British Columbians are $200 away from bankruptcy.
You bring up a great point on the energy and inflation in food. Energy is in everything we do. And if you bring down the cost of energy, it obviously brings down inflation. They're going to see even lower inflation in the United States because they're going to bring in lower energy costs. Well, we're going to continue to increase our energy costs. And the other side of that is our dollar is probably going to fall because that American dollar, you've seen it grow stronger. Gold is sold off. Bitcoin has soared. Gold is sold off because the American dollar looks strong right now.
Yes. And that's a big warning sign for us. Hold on to your hats and sunglasses. Our buying power is going to go down. And if the EU does what, they're saying that they're going to do, which is really like power up again and focus on protecting, the European people, again, that's not going to bode well for our buying power. And I'll just remind us that Trudeau had Germany and Japan begging for our LNG, and instead he turned them away empty-handed. And that to me is just one of the saddest things, that we could be sitting on a gold mine right now as the Canadian people, really in a huge amount of prosperity. And instead, here we sit, talking about how bad our economy is, production caps, and really looking at the next year in a bleak way.
Kevin O'Leary has said it many times. We have the most incompetent management team running one of the richest resource nations in the world, and an election can't come soon enough.
You're so right, and I would agree with Kevin on this one. This administration has failed us and failed the Canadian people.
Well, I think that's we've went over a half hour. We had lots to talk about, though.
I'm sorry.
It's all good. I think it was all good stuff, and we're doing this weekly, so that's great. We're going to have lots of stuff going to be going on both sides of the border and around the world. One that I'm going to keep watching for, he made one of those promises that he's going to end that war before his inauguration day. So that's the clock is ticking on that. I mean, sounds like stuff is moving in the right direction in that regard, but we'll see.
Yeah, he's already moving and shaking. It'll be very interesting. So definitely one to watch.
All right. Thank you, Renee. And thank you for watching Kelowna Now.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence.